Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now is the Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Muda Yusuf. Welcome to the morning show.
Thank you very much and good morning.
Good morning, good to see you.
Well,
quickly, in October, the IMF was complaining about slow growth in Nigeria. Then yesterday, we saw a report quoting IMF as saying that some progress has been made. Have we really made progress with, inflation still double digit, with, food inflation still rising, and with growth rate still about just 1.9%?
Well, we have made some progress. When we assess the economy, there are different perspectives, or there are different ways of assessing the economy. If you look at these issues from the macroeconomic data point of view, definitely we have made some progress. The progress may not have been significant, but if you are moving from a situation where you had maybe about a year ago, you had negative growth, now you are talking about something positive. As at 2018, we talked about 1.9%. As at first quarter, I think we are talking about close to 2%,
Well,
So
it's the same thing. It's still 1.9.
Yes. Slightly above 2%, actually, the last quarterly GDP.
Okay.
So we are moving from negative to a positive, territory. So to that extent, we can say that there's some progress have been made. Then if you look at some other macroeconomic data, like our foreign reserves, for instance,
Yes,
the foreign reserves have moved up to around $44 billion. And foreign reserves also has a way of giving some level of confidence, to investors and all people that want to do business with any particular country. It also has a way of giving some confidence around the foreign exchange. The foreign exchange also has been relatively stable, at least over the past 1 year or so, even though there are issues of these multiple rates, which was one of the things that IMF also raised as part of the concerns it has with the economy. So when you look at some of these variables, inflation too, although we are still in double digits, but it's still within some manageable threshold, slightly over 11.3, 11.4%. So if you look at it from that point of view, you will say that progress has been made. But again, if an average man is looking at the economy, he'll be looking at a different thing entirely. Because these figures don't matter to quite a number of people. They'll be looking at how affordable is food, for instance. How affordable is transportation. How affordable is health care. How affordable is education. These are things that matter. And that is why when we talk about the economy, we can talk about the data in terms of this macroeconomic data. We should also be talking about the development and welfare of the people. So on the score of welfare, I'm not sure we have made significant progress. If you ask the man on the street whether life is getting better, I'm not sure that you will get a positive response. Then from the perspective of business, you'll be looking at the issues of ease of doing business. You'll be looking at the cost of doing business. You'll be looking at the cost of fund. You'll be looking at what challenges we are facing at the ports. You'll be looking at the regulatory agencies. You'll be looking at the tax authorities. All those things that make business worth doing and that gives entrepreneurs comfort. That is the parameter. Those are the parameters that an entrepreneur will use to assess the economy. So when we look at the economy, depending on where you stand, you come up with different kind of conclusions.
So what's your assessment of the government's economic recovery and growth plan, especially for the MSME sector?
Well, progress has been made, but for the SMEs, what is most significant is the investment environment issues. Particularly when you are in production. You'll be looking at things like the situation with power, for instance. For as long as the power situation remains what it is, I'm not sure you can get any SME to actually smile. because of the cost of providing power, especially when you are in a sector that requires a lot of energy. It is a bit easier when you talk about some of them who are in service sector. Even if they require energy, they may not require a 100 kVA generator or 200 kVA generator, where you have to go and be buying diesel at 230, 240 naira per liter. They can easily manage. But when you are in production, it is a different ballgame. And when you are also in a business that requires heavy logistics, that you have to move products from one point to the other, it's also an issue. Because many of these trucks that you see going around, they move on diesel. And diesel is not cheap, either for purpose of powering your generator or for purpose of logistics and transportation. And when you are also in that business, you have a lot of things to do with the ports, with the customs and all those things. So we still have a lot to do in the area of ease of doing business. And for SMEs, financing is still an issue because, of course, there has been some efforts in the area of this intervention fund by BOI, Development Bank of Nigeria, and all of that. But we still have a lot of complaints around issues of credit from the point of view of the cost of credit, because for many SMEs, you access credit at over 25%. Sometimes it can be as high as 30%, you know? And even to access the credit, sometimes the conditions are way beyond the capacities of many of the SMEs. Because they could ask you to go and bring CFO of a very prime land in VI or Ikoyi or something.
Hasn't the Collateral Registry Act helped with that?
Well, it has helped, but again, you cannot compel the banks to take any kind of collateral. Okay, we talk about movable assets and all of that. Well, I don't know how many banks will take a car from you that you drive a fairly used car, depending on the condition of the vehicle anyway. Whether they will take that for you as collateral. You know, it is there, it's an option. But the final decision as to whether a bank will take it, it resides with the banks. There is no law that compels the bank to take movable assets from you. Or you want to take your refrigerator or your freezer to the financial institution and say, take this as collateral. So theoretically, it's good, it's on paper. But in terms of the reality that is on ground, you have to still contend with a lot of these issues. And when we also look at some sectors, you need funds that are long-term. You know, it is not all businesses that you can, you know, use short-term credits for. And over 90% of the funds in the financial system are short-term. You know, maybe 1 year, 60 days, 90 days, that kind of thing. But if, for instance, you're in property, you need long-term funds. You can hardly get that in the current financial system that you have. If you get it, it's like committing an investment suicide. Because you go and take a fund of 25% and say you want to go into property business. I mean, there's no way you can make it. So there is also the issue of the tenure of funds. Because if you are talking of investing in a place like manufacturing, for instance, it will take you some time even for the business to get off the ground. Even in agric, property, construction, transportation, you know, real estate, all those things require long-term funds. And those funds are not readily available. So there are issues of the costs. There are issues of access, having the right kind of collateral. Some banks will ask you for what you call bank guarantee. That will give them some comfort. Many people don't have that. Some ask for all this prime land, CFO and all of that. Not just anywhere, in some choice locations. Many people don't have that. So what happens in many other jurisdictions is that the government has a way of reducing the risk of lending to small businesses, so that the banks will feel more comfortable. You know, there could be things like credit guarantee. A bit of that exists around this NESRA, this Nigeria Risk-Based Agric Lending Scheme. That's a bit of that kind of guarantee, where the government guarantees about 70% of the credit to farmers. So if you can replicate that across other sectors within the SME space, that will give the banks some comfort. Because the banks often argue that, okay, this fund doesn't belong to us. It belongs to depositors.
Let's look at the 2019 budget of continuity as it's tagged. Clearly, there's a revenue shortfall pressure. and concerns of funding. The government seems fixated on taxation as one of the most sustainable ways to finance and fund this budget. What's your take on this?
Well, the tax environment currently, from the point of view of many investors, is a very hostile environment, especially from the FIRS. Because if you have an economy where you are talking about creating jobs, you are talking about building an inclusive economy, you are talking about economic diversification, I think the last set of people you want to be harassing are the investors. Unfortunately, the reverse is the case. The main focus of the tax authorities are those who are investing, which is not consistent even with all the aspirations of economic recovery and growth plan, because when you are in this kind of situation, you should even be pampering those who are investing, because you need them to create employment for you. The government cannot employ all the teeming youths that we have. It is the private sector that will do so. And when we are talking about private sector, we are talking about small businesses, we are talking about micro enterprises, we are talking about medium enterprises, we are talking about large enterprises, we are talking about multinationals and foreign investors. So it is important to create that environment. We are not saying that people should not pay tax, but we should do it in a way that will make investors comfortable. We should do it in a way that does not smash of impunity. Because right now, there is so much harassment, I will put it. Now, just recently, some of my members were complaining about how the tax authorities will just look at your turnover and say that based on this turnover, your profit should be so much. Therefore, your tax should be so much. So if you have paid anything less than that, they serve you a debit note to go and pay tax. How do you treat an investor like that? You know, here is an investor that have provided you with the audited accounts. The investor has showed you the tax clearance that he has got over the years, and yes, you say that he has underpaid the tax. So there are all sorts of issues. Then you have all these problems of this appointment of banks as collection agents, where before you know what is happening, the banks have been served notice that your account should be frozen on account of you not either meeting some tax obligations and things like that. We are not saying that taxes should not be paid. If anything, we promote the ideas of responsible corporate citizenship. But we have to do these things in line with the due process, in line with the law, and having consideration for the fact that this economy needs to encourage investors. If you continue to do things this way, I mean, people will just pack up their business and just go and buy treasury bills. Of course, it's a very comfortable investment. You just sit at your home, no risk, no tax on it. There is no risk, it's risk-free. And you get about 13-14%. But will that create jobs? No. So those who are taking the trouble to put factors of production together, to get capital, to get labor, to get land, to put all these things together, I think they deserve to be encouraged. And the FIRS and the tax authorities have to take all this into consideration.
Two other issues for your attention and analysis. Recently, the Monetary Policy Committee reduced the monetary policy rate by 50 basis points from 14% to 13.5%. But the cash reserve ratio still stood at 25%, the liquidity ratio at 30%. Do you really think that this will achieve the objective of encouraging more lending by the banks? That's one. The second one is this story on the front page of This Day Today about Nigeria's public debt growing by 12.25%. And, local debt alone is about 7 trillion naira. Now, the Department of the Debt Management Office says it will issue bonds, sukuk bonds, green bonds, and all of that to be able to manage this situation. Do you think that's a good option?
Well, first on the monetary policy rate.
Yes.
The rate cut was very marginal, from 14% to 13.5%, very marginal. But the good thing about it is that over the last 3 years or so, this is the first time we are having a rate cut. And that speaks to the fact that the CBN is gradually changing its focus from focusing on this issue of stability of exchange rates, inflation, and all of that, and now looking more in the direction of growth. So the rate cut is symbolic, and it has some signaling significance that this is the direction that the government is going. In terms of the materiality of it, there is really nothing much in terms of the real impact. But the thing is that at least it signals that the CBN is now looking in the direction of stimulating growth and of providing better liquidity to the economy. Of course, just as you said, for as long as the cash reserve requirement is still at 22.5%, which is high, and for as long as liquidity ratio remains at 30%, that is still high. So if you aggregate all of this, you come to the conclusion that we are still in a tight monetary policy environment. But again, we welcome it. At least it's a slight movement in the right direction. But we are hoping that as we progress, some of these key variables of monetary policy could also be adjusted. Then on the issue of debt is a major problem for this economy. And the debt profile is getting to a level that one cannot consider to be sustainable. And unless we do something drastic about it, we may find ourselves in a much more serious situation. Right now, national debt is about 73 billion US dollars, which is huge. It is huge, particularly from the perspective of our capacity to service the debt. Because there is a lot of debate around whether it is relative to GDP, whether it is comfortable or it's not comfortable. Of course, when you relate it to GDP, you can say it is still good because you'll be talking about maybe 25, 24% of GDP. But when you relate it to your capacity to service the debt, the revenue is not there. So that is where the problem is. If you have a budget of about 8.8 trillion, your revenue is about 6 trillion, and the debt service component in the budget is about 2 trillion. That's a lot. By the time you do that, you deprive the economy of vital resources that you normally should have used to build your infrastructure, for instance. You deprive the private sector of funds in the financial market. Because there's what you call this crowding out effect. When government raises bonds, raises treasury bills, all the credits are going to that direction. Because investors feel more comfortable, the rates are good, the risk is zero, the taxes are free. So it deprives the economy of the liquidity that normally entrepreneurs should have access to develop the economy and create jobs. So these are the kind of distortions and disruptions that this heavy debt situation is bringing on us. So we need to begin to look at it. If there are things that you can do, because even the IMF Article 4 consultation report emphasized this issue of revenue. That's a major, major issue that we need to look at. And the way to deal with it is not to be increasing taxes. There's been this argument that we should broaden the net. Although the framework for broadening the net is what nobody has been able to put squarely on the table. Because we have an informal sector that is so huge.
And that is not captured.
That is not captured and that is not easy to pin down. They account for close to 70% of this economy. So the pressure of taxation is on the formal sector of the economy. And most of them investors who need incentives, they need stimulants and things like that. But the opposite is what is happening. So we need to be dealing with...
We're enjoying this conversation, but, Tundu still has a question, and then I wanted to also ask you one more question. If you can just take the two and just treat them quickly, briefly.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, Governor-elect Babajide Sanwo-Olu said that in his first 100 days, he will be approaching the public and private sector regarding Lagos State commerce, boosting trade in Lagos State. What would your contributions be?
In fact, my own question is related. What kind of priorities will you define for the incoming governor in Lagos State? That's Babajide Sanwo-Olu. And have you been engaging, his team to ensure that the Lagos Chamber of Commerce is able to get the best for its members and the sector, the commercial sector in Lagos
Yes,
State.
we had an engagement with him before the election. Now that he has won, it has been a bit difficult to reach him. But I'm sure that we still have an opportunity to engage him. But as far as Lagos is concerned, I think the key issues, which he also mentioned during the campaign, are issues of traffic. Traffic is a very big problem because a lot of man hours are wasted. It has health issues, welfare implications, cost implications, and all of that. So the issues of not just managing traffic, but also expanding other modes of transportation, because that is the key. Because if you look at the volume of vehicles and look at the road capacity, you will see that there is a major capacity problem in terms of the roads being able to accommodate the kind of traffic that you have. There are some situations where no matter how well you manage the traffic, if the capacity has been stretched to the limit, there is nothing the traffic management can do. So we should be looking at the issue of capacity of the roads. We should be looking at the issues of network and this multimodal form of transportation. So that is key. The second very important thing is the issue of the environment. A major issue about managing waste, because increasingly the Lagos is having a lot of urbanization challenges. And one of the problems of urbanization is the issue of waste management, issues of slums, and issues of provision of public utilities, public education. If you look at some of the public schools and public hospitals, you feel sorry for the citizens. So that is why a lot of citizens have to now resort to private schools, private hospitals, and all of that. So the presence of the state in some of these key utilities is very weak. And that is where you can actually help those who are at the bottom of the pyramid. Because many of them don't have the funds to go to private hospitals or to go to quality private schools. So serious intervention in the area of human capital development, public health, public education, issues of the environment, waste management, issues of erosion and all this flooding and things like that, and issues of traffic. And more importantly, issues of security. Because police is a federal institution. But without the support of the states, you cannot have effective police. And that is what has at least made Lagos much safer than many other states. A lot of support from the state government to support the police force and security agencies. So we expect that should be sustained. And of course, regular dialogue and engagement with the private sector.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Muda Yusuf.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've been talking with the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. Tondo?